control what I can control and not stress about anything beyond my sphere of control. I think there's going to be good things that are going to happen, bad things going to happen. But as long as I do my best and control what I can control, let the chips fall where they may. And I think that has helped me maintain mental well-being.
Hey everybody, it's Dr. V, and I've got a very special episode for you guys today with world-renowned cardiac surgeon, Dr. Brian Lima. He's a recognized authority on advanced heart failure therapies and is the surgical director of the first and only heart transplant hospital in Long Island, New York. He is the best-selling author of Heart to Beat, a cardiac surgeon inspiring story of success in overcoming adversity the hard way. Today, we go into how you can prepare yourself and how you can prevent yourself from getting complications of end-stage cardiac disease and how those same things can prevent you from getting very adverse symptoms against COVID-19. Today, my good friend, world-renowned cardiac surgeon, ladies and gentlemen, I can't wait for you to dive right into this conversation with Dr. Brian Lima. Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. And with me today, Dr. Brian Lima, world-renowned cardiac surgeon. And you do transplant surgery, isn't that right?
Oh, yeah. Heart transplant. Best kind of surgery.
Is that the only cardiac surgery you do? Do you do any bypasses at all or just completely transplant?
No, I do everything: adult cardiac surgery, bypass surgery, valve surgery. Most of my efforts, though, focus around heart failure. So advanced heart failure. Surgeries like transplant, mechanical heart pumps, LVADs, things like that.
All right. Well, I want you to just know a little bit about our audience. Some of them are in the medical world, students that want to become doctors. Then we have a lot of people who are into health, longevity, and performance. So we want to go into some of those chronic diseases that both you and I treat later on down the road and talk about how people could avoid maybe needing surgery or needing a procedure for myself. But we want to know, because I know you came out with a book, The Hard Way, and it's really a story about your life.
Yeah, so the book basically it's a hybrid. It's sort of autobiographical yet motivational, self-help, health guide, all those things wrapped into one. So it's a little unique in that aspect, but it's basically, I like to think of it as a blueprint for how to achieve success, no matter kind of what your starting point is. And my story as a heart surgeon really is just a backdrop for that, but it really is not specific to the medical field per se.
Yeah, I noticed you and I actually both have some similarities. I was actually an immigrant myself. I was born in Vietnam to Chinese parents after the Vietnam War. So I was a boat refugee. I was on a boat for 8 months, 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp before I came to America. And I know that your parents were immigrants as well.
Right. My parents came over from Cuba maybe 10 years or less than 10 years after Castro took over. So it was pretty rough. And they basically had to start from scratch here. And I was born here. I was the firstborn of 3 siblings here in the States. And so the book does cover sort of the trials and tribulations, if you will, of what we went through and the challenges I had to overcome in order to, much like I'm sure you described, to get to where we are in the medical profession, which is, pretty difficult, to get to, just to get into, good college, just to get into good medical school, et cetera.
Yeah. So tell me about, growing up as a kid. Did you think, because to be honest, I sort of kind of wanted to be an actor or a comedian or a Tony Robbins kind of person when I was growing up, but I didn't have anybody that looked like me. I mean, people thought of an Asian kid as like, you either do, medicine, electrical engineering, or you be a Jackie Chan. And I don't have any Kung Fu skills worth squat. But did you want to become a doctor initially, or was there something else in your mind?
Much like your case, I really didn't have a lot of role models. I mean, I had Tony Montana, Scarface, the only famous Cuban profile out there, and I loved football, oddly enough, and so I really went all in on that to see if maybe I could become the only American football player that it's ever played.
Yeah.
But quickly learned that was not in the cards for me. Yeah, I mean, it was sort of a pipe dream. It sounded cool. My older sister was an X-ray tech, a radiology tech, and she
Mm.
always talked up radiology and how great radiologists have it. And so that sort of was the initial thing. And my dad had heart trouble, so I was always interested in the heart. But the idea of actually becoming a doctor, a heart surgeon, that was way that was not even something I could fathom at that point in time growing up.
Oh, interesting. So I would imagine wanting to do football, you were very much probably into fitness and into athletics, and sometimes that doesn't jive with the academics. You know, did you always seem to be able to balance the two very well, or was it something that you're like, I'm not going to do football, so I better really brush up on the academics?
I only played high school football. I was able to pull it off in high school. I basically, in the off season, dedicated myself to trying to get bigger, faster, stronger for football.
Yeah.
But even during the season, I managed to make it work just because I had a very regimented schedule. I mean, go to practice and then right after practice, study, for hours on end every night. So I think discipline is what helped me maintain that balance. But clearly at the next level in college, where I didn't have the talent level in football to compete in
Mhm.
that at that level, but I had to study much harder in college. I don't know how you felt about it, but high
Yeah.
school, comparatively speaking, was a cakewalk. So I'm
Uh-huh.
not sure I would have been able to pull off that balance in college.
I
I don't
see.
think. Yeah.
I see. And how did you end up then choosing a path in cardiac surgery? Of all the different specialties that were out there, how did you end up choosing cardiac surgery?
Well, I knew I wanted to become a surgeon after I was able to watch a surgery. So I did this summer program in college between junior and senior year, the year I was applying to medical school.
Mhm.
And it was actually a colon surgery, oddly enough, but just the idea of being a surgeon, I just liked being in the operating room. I liked watching, I just felt the adrenaline and I just loved it. And the cardiac surgery part really came when I was in medical school and I got to see these, PGY 10, 10th year residents that were fully
Yeah.
trained heart surgeons. As a medical student, you like look up to these guys like they were gods just because they knew so much. I mean, you round with them at night and really short of a brain injury, there was nothing that could come through the door that they wouldn't be able to handle.
Yeah.
Anything in the chest, anything in the abdomen, anything. I mean, just that having that level of preparation and confidence, I just got enamored with that. Just sort of almost like I liken it to almost like the Navy SEALs
Yeah.
of surgery. They just, having gone through so much and trained for so long that they could do that. I really fell in love with that aspect of it for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that when I first started and I chose radiology, it was a part of those lifestyle residency. We called road radiology, O ophthalmology, A anesthesia, D derm,
Yep.
because it was
Yep.
more of a lifestyle based thing. And I realized very shortly, it was after my first year of residency where I was really just not seeing patients and not getting any of the action. And then I started to do interventional radiology, which, as you know, is a kind of a surgical subspecialty of the
Yeah.
field. It's, you see patients, we have clinic, and that's what I got really excited to be able to do again, which is, how I ended up doing interventional radiology. So you talk about heart transplant now. Are you doing heart transplant? What are the main conditions people are needing heart transplant for? Do you find that it's because of lack of oxygen, like ischemic cardiovascular type of diseases, or what type of things are you transplanting hearts for mainly?
I would say in my practice, and I think it reflects what most people see, it's about a 60-40, maybe a 70-30 split, where the most of what you're seeing is patients who've had long-standing ischemic heart disease,
Yeah.
lack of blood flow, coronary disease, long-standing. And then the other, 30-40% is everything else that's not
Yeah.
that. Sort
Yeah.
of the quote idiopathic sort of thing. But yeah, a lot of it is coronary disease. That's
Right.
just recognized too late or long standing, but that's a big bulk of it.
This is why I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is doing a little bit more media, the podcast, all of that type of stuff, because what causes when Dr. Lima talks about this ischemic heart disease is poor blood flow to the heart that's, basically happening over time that really weakens the heart. I do the very similar procedures in the legs. Well, I don't do any transplant, but the same type of disease in the legs where there's no blood flow to the legs, I have to open up those arteries. And unfortunately, these are big procedures, and it's great that you and I can do these procedures, but there's only a limited amount of people in the world who can do these procedures. And the other thing is, a lot of people, if they could become a little bit more conscious about how they live their life, would avoid these procedures altogether.
Oh yeah, I mean, I talk about that in the book as well. There's so many things that we all have control over that we could do to sort of reduce or minimize the risk of developing this advanced level of, ischemic disease, whether it's in the heart, in the legs, to the brain. And I think the public does need to be educated more on this, and it's great that you're doing that, and I'm doing my part as well. And but there's simple things. I talk about Life's Simple Seven that American Heart Association
Mhm.
talks about, and it's not rocket science. It's readily achievable by most people, but you got to do it, and that's the part that it's not autopilot. And I think
Mhm.
increasingly in our society, in our culture, we want things now. We want things convenient,
Mhm.
painless. And unfortunately, this is not a passive, painless process. You got to, do the right thing, eat the right things, exercise, all those things.
Yeah, you mentioned it. It's definitely simple. If you ask anybody, oh, okay, what are healthy habits? They'll know it, but they're not actually doing it. So,
Right.
sometimes we can't actually pin down the patients. I believe you and I, or you know what, I'm just going to speak for myself, that as a doctor, I never really got trained initially as to how to actually get somebody to make a change. I look at my fiance moved in with her bonus daughter, and sometimes just telling them to do something is not the way to enroll them into doing something. I think sometimes with the short, appointments we have, it's very difficult to get them to really identify them as a person that can start to make those changes. Do you find that to be something that you see in your practice as well?
I do, and unfortunately, on the one hand, I'm sort of the end of the line.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, if you're
Yep.
if you're sitting down for an appointment with
Yep.
me to talk
Hmm.
about, well, I think we might need to have to consider a heart transplant. I think clearly we've got,
Yeah.
we've maybe
Yeah.
missed the boat a little bit.
Yeah.
But that being said, people I think sometimes need to just hit rock bottom,
Yeah.
whether it's getting over addiction, or realizing that they really need to change their habits.
Hmm.
And it's not until they really feel that they have, are convinced that
Yeah.
they have, that they're ready to make the change.
Yeah.
And that threshold is different for different people. And I try to bring that to light the best I can, but there's only so much you can do. That you can't make up for 20 years of bad habits in
Yeah.
15 minutes of a pep talk, all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
But
Which is why I feel, your book and your platform and other doctors who are starting to have social platforms. I mean, it's really our opportunity to be able to have that conversation before they end up in our offices. So I think
right,
it's
because people are, that's why the vitamin and health industry is $1 billion business, because people are constantly looking for that magic bullet, the pill, that this pill, you take this pill, you can eat whatever you want.
yeah.
You don't have to actually, that magical solution that's going to obviate the need to do actual work, hard work, painful
Hmm.
work. I think a lot of people hold out for that,
Yeah.
and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, so you would definitely say it's a cultural thing, but how do we
Right.
start to shift that culture? I mean, you're right about about people actually needing to hit rock bottom. I mean, 4 years ago, I was in private practice and I was overweight, I was diabetic, I was hypertensive, I was on prescription medicines, and it wasn't until I took a pause and sit and asked myself, all right, do I really know what health is, and am I really living the life that I should be living? And it was a doctor that started to get diseases that I was treating me, that was really the wake up call for me. But do you have any perspective or ideas as to how to give somebody a wake up call without having them go through a process that irks them, or that where they have to get disease first?
Well, to your point, I think that's in large part what motivated me to write the book, and also
Yeah.
to, even before the book even was written, to launch sort of my professional, social media pages, to sort of get the word out about
Yeah.
some of the statistics because, I talk a lot about how heart disease in general doesn't get anywhere near the street cred that cancer does. People hear
Right.
cancer or even the hint of cancer and their ears perk up and they get very nervous. Like, okay, what do I got to do? Tell me what I got to do. I can't, it's heart disease doesn't scare people, I don't think, the way cancer does, but it's more deadly than cancer, most cancers. So I think just educating the public, getting the word out, doing what you're doing what I'm doing, the one-on-one patient, that's a different matter. That's tough because a lot of the time, their patterns have been set there. And so it's challenging. It's challenging to say the least.
No, for sure. Let me ask you right now, what is it like in this environment of the pandemic over by where you're in Long Island, I believe?
Right. Long Island, New York. Yeah.
What's the situation with, your hospital beds and how your environment and your city is handling the pandemic?
Well, I have to say we took it on the chin right out of the gates. We were we were at the epicenter of when the virus it really hit, and so we were crushed. Our health system, Northwell, I think it's something like 10,000. We took care of more COVID patients than any other health system in the United States, and we were inundated. All of our ICUs at the main hospital that I practice at North Shore University Hospital, all the ICUs became COVID units. Our heart surgery ICU became a COVID unit, and myself and my other partners in heart surgery, we actually became COVID doctors. It's just one of those things that it basically took over everything. It became front and center of what we were doing. And that lasted, I think, a good month or two. Since that time and things have normalized, we're not seeing it as bad, I think, as other areas of the country now, because I think having experienced what we went through, we now obviously do all the right things. We've been very careful about social distancing and advising the public and enforcing that the best we can. But it's starting to creep back a little bit, I will say. I would say over the last month. That's somewhat unavoidable, I think, given what we're seeing, across the country. And hopefully now with the vaccines available, I just got vaccinated yesterday.
Yeah.
I think I saw that you got vaccinated.
Yeah,
too.
I got vaccinated on Friday. I feel great.
Yeah, me too.
How do you feel? All right. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I feel great. So, and that's another thing, right? I mean, showing that, we ourselves are doing that and sharing that on social media is important too for the public to see that, we're not just talking a big game, we're actually doing it. We believe in it. We believe that actually will help get this thing under wraps. So that's another major thing that we could do to help the situation.
You and I in big cities, do see the effects of COVID in our hospitals. Here in LA, we're running out of ICU beds right now as we speak. But I do have a lot of friends still, maybe not in large cities, who feel maybe that COVID, there are still some COVID deniers that are out there. You actually having firsthand being witnessed to everything that's happening, what can you say to the person who thinks that this might be a hoax?
That is so sad to even think that there's still some stragglers out there that believe this could be a hoax. I mean, having been, gowned up head to toe in these COVID units, seeing people die every day and not being able to do anything about it, and having to be in those situations where families can't even be there.
Yeah.
It's just so tragic and nothing like anything I've ever experienced in medicine. I've known personally people who've kind of unfortunately still advocated this whole hoax thing, this whole hoax phenomenon, that had family members pass, and so unfortunately they kind of, learned firsthand that this isn't a hoax. And I think that's part of too, that we need to mend the faith in physicians in the medical field. I think that's, what COVID taught us is that the public really aren't entirely 100%, trusting of physicians. And so I think this maybe will be an avenue for us to regain the public's trust so that we could prevent this thing from happening again, or letting it get to the degree that it did. So,
yeah. How are you doing personally as a doctor, knowing that you've got, a family at home that you have to protect, as well as being on the front line? How are you handling and how are you managing your emotions and your own self-care?
Well, when we were in the facing the brunt of it at the beginning, that was surreal. I mean, I felt I finally kind of caught a glimpse of what it must feel like to be a soldier,
Yeah.
where, because, with what we do, the patients are usually the ones at risk. It's
Mhm.
rare, if at all, that we're at risk with
Mhm.
the procedures that we do. And for the first time ever, I was at risk.
Yeah.
My family was at risk, and that is sort of a real, I don't know, it's tough to wrap your brain around that. And so you kind of just, I'm the kind of guy that tends to compartmentalize and just go, and you just sort of don't dwell on it, and you just get in there and do it. And obviously I took every precaution I possibly could, but we were all, I mean, flying by the seat of our pants. We had no idea if the PPE we were using was really, it's the best we got, right? But how do you really know? So we got through that, and it wasn't easy. I think a lot of people had difficulty, dealing with the stress of not being able to help patients. I
Yeah.
mean, I got into medicine because I really wanted to help people, but when you have people dying with a disease that you don't have an answer for, you throw it. I felt like I was throwing every pitch, and I couldn't strike them out. Like I couldn't. I mean, I was throwing my best stuff. Nothing we could do in many very tragic cases, and that was really a tough pill to swallow. You labor through it, you persevere, and you just kind of gear up for the next patient, and hope that will bring you that sort of that fulfillment that you went into medicine for. But it was really tough. It really was.
Yeah. I tell people we have no idea what we can control in terms of what the government does to control this thing, or how this thing is going to spread, and the rollout of the vaccines. But what we can control certainly is, still all the other factors that are important for our health, are, getting good sleep, eating well, moving still, making sure we have a sense of community. Physical distancing doesn't necessarily mean social distancing, as you and I are forming community here, and working on those things are so important. One of the things that kind of tie in, to maybe, the surgeries that you perform, COVID is really affecting more people with some kind of chronic condition, some kind of chronic disease, as people that are needing your surgeries, or people that have actually lived, a certain lifestyle. I think really it's, pointing out to us that in general, and I talk about this in my book, about this entity called the bioenergetic state. Our choices, our lifestyles dictate basically how our cells behave, whether they're functioning very well, or in states of inflammation that ultimately cause chronic disease. So I think COVID is really kind of, pointing a light towards, we in America are a little bit more disease prone than the rest of the world, because it's impacting us here much harder than it is in, places like Japan, for example.
Right. A lot of the patients that we were treating with COVID that got severe COVID disease,
Yeah.
that required a ventilator, that required ICU care, et cetera, these were the same patients that would have so-called, cardiovascular risk factors,
Right.
obesity, diabetes, hypertension, all these things that put you at risk for heart disease also made you more susceptible to getting severe COVID disease, which, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, but I mean, once you crossed over into that severe realm of COVID disease where you had to get intubated, that things were not gonna, looking well. I mean, that
Yeah.
was a pretty grim prognosis there. So it just also shined a light on the fact that not only having this, cardiovascular health, promoting cardiovascular health for yourself is important
Mhm.
to prevent cardiovascular disease itself,
Yes.
but also maybe, protecting you against other things, other illnesses, infections, etc. And this really, really emphasized that aspect of it.
And I think it's so important to reemphasize that you not only prevent yourself from getting chronic disease. I mean, that speaks to a certain set of the population, but I have a lot of people that I treat one-on-one in my concierge clinic, for who want peak mental, physical, sexual performance. Once you start to, work on the same type of things that will prevent you from getting disease, you're actually going to get the most out of your body. So if you want that extra edge back in the boardroom, in the bedroom, or whatever it is, it's the same type of things, and it will prevent you from getting, or it will mitigate the effects of COVID if you have it. It'll mitigate
Right.
you from, getting a surgery here. It's really those lifestyle things that we could all be a little bit more mindful of, and to start to implement changes in our life so that we can avoid these conditions.
Yeah, it translates into everything. Everything is
Yeah.
interconnected. It's not just, one compartment versus another. It's your overall well-being, your mental health, your social health, how you interact at work, how your
Yeah.
performance at work, how you interact with your family, with your loved ones, what you're able to contribute. I mean, it's all ties in. And so I think if you can promote good cardiovascular health, it's going to have a halo effect into all aspects of your life. It's so important, underappreciated. I think people don't make that connection, unfortunately.
Right. Uh, what would you say would be the top couple of things that you recommend to patients and the community as a whole to maintain optimal cardiovascular health?
Well, I think first and foremost, what I see is, making sure you're seeing a doctor on a regular basis. It's managing your blood pressure and your cholesterol and your sugar, all those things that even in the best of hands where you're doing everything right, maybe beyond your control, maybe genetic, but so at least you have someone that's manning that aspect of it and controlling that and intervening with medications. But you have to be active. I think that's another thing. People think, well, I hear this all the time. I've never smoked a day in my life. I eat right, but a lot of people overlook the fact that you have to exercise. It's not optional. Just because you do everything else right, you have to be active as well, and that's pretty, moderate exercise. Several times a week. 3 to 5 times a week of good moderate exercise. I think that's very, very important. So you got the doctor, keeping tabs on what your health is, you're exercising regularly, and of course diet, making sure you really are on top of what you're eating. And heart healthy diet just means, portion control, low sodium, low fat content, and low sugar content, but it doesn't have to taste bad. It can still
Yeah,
be,
right.
it can still be pretty tasty.
No, you bring up all these lifestyle points. I talk about in my book the 7 pillars of the bioenergetic state, which is sleep, nutrition, movement, reducing our stress, making sure we have community, managing our social relationships, and also having that deep sense of purpose, and certainly avoiding the toxins. I mean, smoking. I hope people aren't still doing that, but I mean, you drastically reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease with smoking.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mention smoking. It's almost because I can't believe people would even think about smoking. But where
Yeah.
things have creeped in is on the vaping side, right?
Yeah.
People have latched onto that as, oh, well, this doesn't count, right? As smoking. Well, it does count, and it could be even worse in certain scenarios. So it definitely is something to be avoided at all costs.
Yeah, that's not something I'm aware of the data on that. Are we finding it has the same type of? I know that vaping does cause some idiopathic pulmonary diseases. Are you finding it to have negative consequences to our cardiovascular health as well?
Right. I mean, even straight from the American Heart Association, they strongly advise to avoid any tobacco-containing products, including vaping. And we've also seen this rash of, obscure sort of ARDS cases. One of my colleagues in Michigan did a lung transplant on a youngster who I think was
Yeah.
vaping with marijuana. So some of the chemicals that are used for these can also have pretty drastically negative impact on the lungs. So I think avoiding it altogether
Yeah.
is the way to go.
Amazing. Really, really good information. I mean, it just goes to show that if you want to keep yourself in top mental, physical, emotional performance, it's the things that you can do every single day that will prevent you from going into the hospital table, will prevent you from getting serious complications from COVID. So it's something that, you should really take on seriously now before, you ever come up with, this problem.
Right. I mean, I don't take it personally at all when people say that they hope they never you get to meet me in a professional capacity, and I hope so too. I hope it to be in only friendly social circles and not in my office where we're having to talk about pretty serious surgery. I think even though I'd be putting myself out of business, I would prefer for people not have to see someone like me. And so I think the measures that people can take day-to-day basis to reduce the likelihood of having to see someone like me, I'm all for it.
All right, very nice. Now, I've got one last question for you, Dr. Lima. And before I get to that question, where can people find you?
So my website is brianlimamd.com, and my book, Heart to Beat, is available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere where books are sold.
Awesome. Living the incredible life that you've lived so far, seeing everything that you've seen on the operating table, and you can pick anything in the world, whether it be an emotion, a surgery, a person, but what has been your best medicine in your life?
My best medicine has been just to control what I can control and not stress about anything beyond my sphere of control. I think there's going to be good things that are going to happen, bad things going to happen. But as long as I do my best and control what I can control, let the chips fall where they may. And I think that has helped me maintain mental well-being, has not allowed stress to overwhelm me. And it's a hard, given the business that I'm in, the kind of surgeries that I do, it's easy to go down that rabbit hole. But I think that once I embraced that mindset of just do the best you can and what you can control, everything else seems to always work itself out.
That's beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Brian Lima, world-renowned cardiac surgeon and author of Heart to Beat. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. If you received value, I truly, truly appreciate it. If you could leave a 5-star review, it will help the show grow. And I'd love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at KienVuMD. If you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. And remember, you are your best medicine.